Hello all, sorry for the hiatus, but I finally wanted to sit down and write about Shattered Space and share my thoughts on the DLC and Bethesda in general. Firstly, thank you for tuning in, and like many YouTube beggars, please like and subscribe, please.
Thank you so much.
Lastly, before getting into the nits and grits, I must state that I have done my very best to avoid all coverage of Shattered Space as to not have my thoughts and opinions influenced by the echo chamber found in the YouTube gaming corner. If you're new here, please understand that I like Starfield, but I also acknowledge its shortcomings. Also, I don't have much of a plan for this video other than it being an open journal and exercise of my meandering thoughts. So the overall stance that I share may be positive or negative, meaning as I write, I'm not going to force my mind to align one way or another, and hopefully I can produce a work that incites some sort of interesting dialogue and later an exchange of ideas in the comments. Ultimately, on a loftier scope, I hope this video enters the canon of gaming coverage that aids in asserting the opinion of the consumer. Within the arena of capitalism, our dollars will always have the loudest voice, but pieces like this potentially help guide the masses into which direction their money should be allocated. Therefore, I hope to offer my opinions with goodwill in the spirit of charitable critique. Currently, I have 126 hours logged for Starfield. I didn't pay close attention to that time before starting Shattered Space, but I feel safe guessing that I've spent about 6 to 10 hours with the DLC. So no, I have not completed Shattered Space, but I am currently in the process of playing the main questline. My very boring, uncontentious opinion of Shattered Space is that it's fine. It's not game-changing, but it's also not bad. It's as DLC should be, more of the same game that I initially invested in. My one gripe about it being just fine is that with the marketing campaign, Bethesda did what all publishers do. Hype the DLC up like it's going to completely change the game and be an absolute must-have.
As you explore the city of Dazra and the surrounding planet, you'll learn the truth of what happened, become entangled in the political feud between the minor houses, and ultimately decide the fate of House Varun, a fate that could affect the rest of the settled systems.
We can restore the intended order of things.
Thank you for joining us for a closer look at Shattered Space. We worked hard to make this a journey you won't forget. We're incredibly grateful for your support and passion. Stay tuned for more updates as we head toward launch on September 30th.
Which, them doing that is fine. That's their job. That's a part of the consumer world we live in. As consumers, we are subject to enduring the ranting and raving of charlatans pushing their snake oil. I just wish for once a game studio would actually deliver what they promise. Bethesda did do that once when they released Tribunal and Blood Moon DLC for Morrowind. I mentioned Morrowind in one of my past videos, and that may cause you to roll your eyes. But ever since I became a fangirl of Bethesda games, I've been chasing the dragon of that life-changing gameplay experience of being fully immersed in a fantasy world. What hurts Shattered Space as a DLC is that it's a planet added to a game that has 1,000 planets. Sure, the home world of Varun has a bit more tender love and care than about 98% of those planets, but ultimately it ends up feeling like just another planet. Shattered Space adds a dot in a sea of dots. Shifting focus, let me expand on the extra attention to detail spent on Varun Kai. It's nice. The foreign curved rock formations are beautiful and serve as enticing terrain to explore. Initially, the reds and purples of the planet appease the visual appetite, but very quickly that attractiveness diminishes and begins to feel washed out and muddy. My desire to explore and experience is tempered by the stifling feeling of magenta hues crushing my will to live. Thankfully, there are mods that remedy this, such as various LUT removers and royal weathers for Shattered Space. I found the planet much more enjoyable to explore with a brighter and more varied color palette. As for the inhabitants, the Varun are less like what I expected. Over the course of the vanilla game, the player's primary source of what the Varun are like is informed by interacting with Andreja and the enemy zealots encountered in battles along the way. Andreja is one of, if not my favorite character in the game. Her presence offers a stark contrast to the rest of the Constellation members who tend to be annoyingly diplomatic and agreeable. Andreja is a tough-as-nails, strong, independent woman who is actually likable and successfully expresses feminine traits that make her vulnerable and interesting without causing her to appear weak or as a reductive caricature of women. More importantly, she gives crucial insight to Varun culture and customs. Suffice to say, my expectations of the Varun were set high. Upon meeting them, however, they left me feeling disappointed. Rather than depict a faction that is complex and nuanced, Bethesda decided to depict a divided and oversimplified society, progressive religion bad types, and stupid hard-headed all-must-serve zombies, all of whom are whiny and preachy. I will admit that the quests found in Shattered Space harken back to the glory days of Bethesda, but they suffer from what I perceive as the fate of all successful franchises. They feel formulaic and repetitive. You play one fetch quest, you've played them all. You play one go find this guy and convince him to come back home with us quest, and you've played them all. There's an interesting arc that happens with successful game franchises. There's the initial title that captivates its audience for being a unique and satisfying gameplay experience that garners critical and commercial success. Then sequels are produced that have diminishing returns in quality, yet growing returns in sales, which isn't always the case, yet common.
Resident Evil.
The publisher then determines a winning formula, sticks to that design until they see a decline in sales. This also isn't always the case. If sequels receive overwhelmingly negative reviews, this has also been a reason for redesign. Once they acknowledge a need for change, the publisher pushes to reinvent the franchise to incite new life, yet never quite captivates the original audience. Instead, the franchise becomes a shell of what it used to be.
Resident Evil 6.
A great example of this arc is the Resident Evil series. The original 3 installments followed the same design principles with some changes from each iteration, but for the most part offer the same overall experience in gameplay, story, and quality. Then something happens. A 4th installment is released, Resident Evil Code Veronica X, which was by far my least favorite entry in the acclaimed series. Many gamers may disagree, but having experienced these releases in real time, I remember Code Veronica offering an unimagined tired gameplay experience that lacked the same excitement, quality, and creativity as the original trilogy. Most notably, Code Veronica was the first installment that did not feature the series' signature pre-rendered environments.
There's no way he could get here, even if he is your brother.
Yes, he can. I'm sure of it.
No way. He won't come. You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
What was that all about?
Time passes, and with the GameCube, and no longer being a Sony exclusive, Nintendo capitalizes on breathing new life into the series with a remake of the first Resident Evil, as well as a successful prequel, Resident Evil 0, featuring a brand new story, player swap feature long before GTA 5, and built on the lore of the franchise. GameCube's Resident Evil remake also monumentally set the bar for what a proper remake should deliver: retention of the classic gameplay that made the original a hit with careful modernization, and completely overhauled graphic fidelity. After releasing the original Resident Evil lineup on GameCube, Nintendo took a bold step and once again set a precedent with the series for rebooting a successful yet aging franchise with the release of Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 captivated the original audience while gaining a much larger audience that catapulted the already popular series to a new level of critical and commercial success. Resident Evil 4 reset the clock on the franchise and spawned sequels in the same vein as the original trilogy, building on the new gameplay style. However, Resident Evil 5 and 6 took a much harsher turn into action gameplay, which alienated fans of the originals. The aftermath of Resident Evil 6 inspired another quiet era for the franchise and led to the second reboot of the series, switching to the first-person gameplay style. I've yet to play chapters 7 and 8, not due to a lack of interest, but simply due to getting older. Now in my late 30s, my love affair with the Resident Evil series started with my brother bringing home a brand new console called the Sony PlayStation, and a strange looking black box that didn't quite look like a VHS box. Mind you, at this time, I still had a few years before learning what a DVD was. Basically, the Resident Evil franchise to me is like an old friend with whom I have fantastic memories and keep up with from far and loving from a distance. So why go on this tangent? I believe Bethesda RPGs are on this arc of stagnation. We've entered the Code Veronica era of Bethesda RPGs. Their 3 open-world RPG IPs all follow the same basic game design, and the unfortunate news is that it's getting old. Moreover, Bethesda strips away depth with each new release. Since Morrowind, every release has become more and more accessible to a wider audience. More accessibility in the gaming industry translates to a lack of depth, which is dangerous for an RPG series. Take a moment to compare Fallout 3 to Fallout 4. A big role-playing element lost was weapon degradation and repair. This is just one gameplay element that completely alters the experience of depth. Considering this trend, my expectations for Starfield were low, which may actually be why I was still satisfied with the game. I don't go to McDonald's expecting a 5-star burger. I go to McDonald's expecting a McDonald's burger. I already knew Starfield was going to be disappointing in some way, although I will say each Bethesda release surprises me in the way it disappoints me. Elder Scrolls 6 is going to suffer this same trend. It's not going to be any sort of exception, especially considering the overwhelming numbers that Starfield did. That has created a false sense of security for Bethesda. It's basically emboldened their choices for the franchise. I'm open to being surprised positively, but I don't see that happening. And until gameplay is revealed, I question how many more releases Bethesda has until it has to reboot and reimagine their RPG design. Maybe they are already doing this with the Elder Scrolls 6, and I'll eat my words. Or maybe it will be more of the same and be thrown to the YouTube wolves to suffer the same fate as Starfield. My Jerry Springer final thoughts. I'm not trying to rip the game apart or the studio. Instead, I just want to call them and gamers alike to hold the final project to a higher standard. Perhaps it's a losing game though. The more money a franchise makes, the more investments they get, and thus the more pressure that is placed on the games to perform. From my observation, it's this pressure that undermines the development of games. Truly creative and imaginative developers are forced to abandon innovation for what's safe and appealing to the largest audience for the purpose of monetary success and satisfying investors. I suppose there's no escaping this other than remaining independent. The best example of this is Hideo Kojima and his independent developer Kojima Productions. However, now being a part of Microsoft, it may be too late for Bethesda. But maybe others will learn from this. I just want that serendipitous moment of being lost in a world where my problems and worries don't exist. Anyways, thanks for watching. Drop a comment, and if you liked this, subscribe. Take care.